Hello and welcome to the Shea Hates Everything Podcast, where we talk about video games, movies, comics, and other shit that matters. My name is Shea, and today I hate learning something new and not immediately understanding it.
My name's Kyle, and today I hate having so many videos open in a browser. When I swap tabs, the video that's still playing skips around and the audio starts cutting out, and it just grates on my nerves.
Is that like an internet issue, or is it like a computer issue?
I think it's a computer issue. I
think
too
many things going on.
Well, because when I say I have a lot of tabs open, I mean I have about like 25 tabs of different YouTube
that happens
videos.
to me too.
Because instead of like actually using the subscriptions thing and like having YouTube tell me what videos I've watched, I just open them all as they're released, and then
you realize, oh, I've seen this already.
No, I mean like as soon as I see it up in my subscriptions, I open it in a new tab and pause it, and then so I can see all of the videos I have to watch in like one or two browser windows. I actually have
so they'll just stay open forever until you get time to watch. That's smart. Good use of your technology there.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I got RAM to spare. What's up? Yeah.
I definitely I utilize the subscriptions tab, but I fall into the same trap where there are so many YouTube channels that I follow, and I really only watch videos once, maybe twice a week. And so I'll, when I'm gonna watch YouTube videos, it's gonna be 3 or 4 hours of me watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So I totally do the same thing. I open all of them up, and then I go through and order them, because it's like, oh hey, I have 4 BOO videos that I want to watch. I don't want to watch all those in a row. I want to watch one at the beginning, and then I'll come back to it, 6 videos later, and then one at the very end, because
his are like
compulsive.
40-minute Minecraft videos.
Well, yeah.
You don't want to do a bunch of those back to back.
That's a bad example because, to be honest, I am not caught up on BOO because they're so long. It's like if you fall a week behind watching someone who uploads a 30-minute video every day, it's just you're never going to catch up. You have to get over it at some point.
Right.
But we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, so I don't want to spend too much time on anything else. We're going to be walking through some more E3 games. Last episode, we talked about 3 big press conferences, EA, Bethesda, and Ubisoft, and kind of went through their big games they announced. Talked a little bit about each of them. Today, we're going to be talking about Microsoft and Nintendo, and then in the next episode, we'll walk through Sony's press conference, and then a couple other games that really weren't present at any of the press conferences that we feel are worth talking about. But before we get to that, I do want to bring this up because we talked about it a little bit in the last episode. So the new season of Game of Thrones is starting. I love that show. I'm obsessed with that show, as well as the books. Kyle, you used to watch it, and then you stopped. And I feel like you have now fallen into this hipster category of people that brag about the fact that they don't watch Game of Thrones. And so I want to hear from the horse's mouth, why the fuck would you stop watching this show? It's amazing.
All right, first off, one problem with what you've said is I don't brag about the fact that I don't watch it. Just if it comes up in conversation, I go, yeah, I don't watch that show. I don't like it. So that the people who are trying to tell me about this thing they're excited about know that I'm going to have zero appreciation for it. So
that's fair. That's fair.
I save them time.
But you're right. You don't brag about not watching it. But there are certainly people out there that are like, oh, I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. How cool am I? That's not what I'm getting at with you.
Right.
But I feel like you do have this, I think it comes down to your stubbornness. And I don't mean to be hypocritical. I'm just as stubborn as you sometimes. But I feel like it's the stubbornness of no, I've decided to stop watching. I don't give a shit what you say about the show, how many people like the show, what they change, what they do, all the cool shit that's happening. I will never watch the show again because I have decided that I will never watch the show again. That's more what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I would say that's probably 49% of it, and then the other 51%, just so I can say that's not the majority, the other 51% is I just got burned by that show too many times.
Burned in what way? Because this is the crux of the issue.
Yes. I became very attached to specific characters, and they died in what I felt to be really dumb, completely avoidable ways.
So how far did you get? And to be fair, I'm not going to be spoiling later seasons of the show because they're more recent for people. But how far did you get? Because we will talk about spoilers up until that point.
So I stopped watching after Red Wedding. That was the episode where because Rob was the last character. I was like, yes, I'm really interested in seeing what they do with him and his potential for bringing some good to this place. And they fucking wiped him out in the stupid, shittiest way possible, and that really upset me. Because I grow very attached to characters in different medias, like maybe more than some people do. And so because that show discards people with wanton abandon, that upsets me, and I just don't need to spend time on something that upsets me that much. Also, like, the only other character I was attached to was Joffrey, because I just wanted to see how he was going to fucking die. And A, he lived way too long after he should have. But, and B, I did see, I went back and watched, my friend showed me his death, and then also, like,
so
another
you got that
significant
resolution.
death. I did. Yeah, and so I feel that's all I really need. Now, I've heard...
Go ahead.
The White Walkers were also interesting to me, and the fact that they never came up, like, at all in those earlier seasons, apart from that initial, like, first episode thing, was another thing that bugged me, and I didn't want to keep watching and getting burned by the show in the hopes that someday some White Walker shit would happen. And now I know I've heard some stuff about that in more recent seasons, and I can't, like, that show isn't set up so, like, you can just watch the White Walker stuff, like,
for sure,
because, you know, it's all so connected, and all the different people's storylines, you know, they intersect and then diverge in admittedly probably interesting ways, I assume, and I just, like, the White Walker is the only thing that would still interest me. Like, I don't care about Jon Snow, like, whatever. I don't care who his parents actually are. I don't give a shit about that. And Arya, I don't really care about her character either. I mean, the assassin thing was kind of cool, and I've heard maybe there's a little more of that hinted at.
The faceless men?
Yes, yeah. And, like, also the Dany, I'm not into the Dany stuff or the dragons or whatever. That's like this... It's because in the earlier seasons, they set it up to be this thing that effectively has no impact on the rest of the story until way down the line. And I needed some form of intersection, right? Like, and that just never happened for me in, like, the first 2 or 3 seasons. So I just became uninterested in that storyline. And it's just, I get they're really long books, and the whole, like, I'm sure there's tons of payoff for all these different storylines. It's like, I just don't want to put myself through it, because it's a slog, like, emotionally and mentally, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone has their own opinion. Like, I wouldn't consider it a quote-unquote slog. Like, I feel like that has a lot of negative connotations, but it certainly is like a slow burn. Even if you are a fan of it, things can move very slowly in the course of the show.
Okay,
that I definitely agree with.
Slow burn, yes.
Yeah. It's just... And like, you're allowed to watch whatever the hell you want to watch, and obviously I poke fun at you about the stubborn attitude that you can take about some stuff, but, like, the core of it is more just, it just seems weird to me, because you're such a big fan of fantasy and high fantasy in like, specifically, it just seems weird that this isn't a show that you know, attached yourself to, because, you know, it is slow, and I get from the perspective of, like, you know, they make me care about this character and then they kill this character, because that show is so unique on television for what it's willing to do. You know, I always liken it back to Psycho, you know, one of the best films ever made, where you spend, like, half of this movie with this main character figuring out her story, why she's doing what she's doing in this place, and then she just fucking gets killed. And then it's like, wait, that's not the story of this movie? What the hell's going on? And it was so unique at the time, and there aren't many things that have replicated that sort of mentality. And I know that's what made me so impressed by Game of Thrones, because I saw the first season before reading the books, was when Ned died, like, at the end of that season. And you're like, holy shit, this is the main character of this show, and they just killed him off.
Well, you knew he was going to die. I mean, he dies in everything he's in. I
didn't. Well, yes, fair enough. Sean Bean, yes. That's fair point. Sean Bean dies in everything. But, like, from a character perspective, it was like, oh, they create this really intense scenario. How is he going to get out of it? That's what will be interesting, is how is he going to get out of it? And then, wait, fuck, he didn't get out of it? Are you kidding me? And so it really set the stage for all these characters. Like, I totally get the perspective of why care about these characters if they're all going to die anyway. I feel like one of the strengths of the show is that it's constantly introducing new characters for you to be interested in. And whenever kind of there's a storyline that takes a back seat or something moves a little more slowly, like I look back at season 5 of the show, which was I consider to be kind of the weakest season. There's a whole thing with Daenerys where she's just in this city of Meereen ruling, and she just doesn't really do much. And she's kind of an ineffectual leader. There's not much interesting going on with her story, and it's boring. Like, I'm not making an excuse because it is boring, but the show also does introduce these other storylines to kind of keep your attention, and they fairly successfully limit her amount of screen time because it's not as engaging as like the other stuff that's going on. And I guess like that's the crux of what I want, like why I wanted to bring this up, is it just seemed so odd to me that for someone that likes fantasy as much as you do, what most people consider to be the best fantasy show on television, quite possibly the best fantasy show to ever be on television, you aren't into. It just seemed weird to me.
Yeah, I guess it really comes down to I don't like I like stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a character arc, and I like a sense of understanding and completion. I like it to be wrapped up neatly, and especially with characters that I'm very invested in. So a lot of that's why most forms of media, fantasy or otherwise, your main characters don't die. There's some sort of an engaging and not necessarily a feel good, but a resolution which you can come to terms with. And Game of Thrones very rarely did that for any of its characters. They just die really shitty, awful deaths, and like that's not a wrapped present, right?
Sure.
That's like, I don't know. I could come up with an analogy, but I'm not going to. I think that my statement stands on its own. But it's just that doesn't make me feel good. Like that doesn't make me feel like there's some sense of completion or understanding that I have about the character and their circumstances. I don't feel like anything's changed for the better for them or anything. Like they just die shitty, awful deaths, and like that.
I mean,
sucks,
not all of them. Sometimes they do die heroically.
Yeah,
yes,
sure.
But
and
you're
like,
right.
I'm not going to dispute that. That's why I say most.
There are definitely
knowledge.
places where like, wait, seriously, why would that character die right there? Like it feels so atypical is what it is, because we're so used to watching TV and movies with these, larger overarching storylines where all of these characters matter, and like you're saying, like there's some sense of satisfaction to even if a character dies, like they die in a way that matters and is important. And Game of Thrones is not that way.
Right.
Like, it feels more real to life. Because, like, you can have, these everyday heroes in real life that you think, have this grander impact. And then, nope, they just die. I remember watching The Pacific, which was a television follow-up to Band of Brothers. Phenomenal show. The Pacific a little less so. But there was a character on there who was, I believe he was the very first person to ever win the Medal of Honor. And it was in the Japanese theater of war, I guess you would say. And he's this super heroic character or person that really existed that they put on television, and he wins the Medal of Honor and then decides to go back for another tour of duty in Japan, and then just randomly dies, like just nothing special. He won the Medal of Honor for doing this crazy heroic act and saved a bunch of his other platoon mates and killed a bunch of Japanese soldiers, and was this huge badass. Gets the Medal of Honor, goes back to the war, and then, like, just randomly dies. Like, doesn't do anything heroic to die, isn't, like, saving people's lives to die. He just gets shot and dies, and that's the end of his story. And it's one of those where, like, that's not how that's supposed to go.
Right.
Like, you should go out in some big blaze of glory.
Like, you don't feel
it's kind of more
about
of, like,
it.
It's a real-life example of something like Game of Thrones, where
Right.
there are these big storylines that are happening, and some characters just don't get to see them all the way through. And that's just the way that life works. But I get why, because television and movies are this separate entertaining medium, this escapist medium, why that isn't always satisfying.
Yeah, and that last bit you just said there, it sums up, what I was gonna come back to you with. But yeah, I mean, it's just, for me, it's escapism, and I deal with shitty real world stuff all the time, and like I don't,
you don't want that in your TV.
Exactly. Like, and there are,
there's
there's plenty of interesting and engaging forms of media. The art imitates life community. People are really into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's never been for me. I can appreciate it and understand it and see why someone might be interested, but it's just not for me. And so even if it's a formula I enjoy and, connect with, if it leans more towards that direction, because life so often does not have neat tie-ups at the end, it doesn't feel good. And so it's like reading the fifth Harry Potter book. Like that, it doesn't feel good to read.
Yep.
But I mean, that doesn't make it less of an accomplishment or less interesting. It just doesn't feel good, and so I don't enjoy it,
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, the biggest reason that it bums me out you're not still watching the show is, I mean, I like to look at things and talk about things on kind of a deeper level than a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like my way is better, but like you're one of the few people I know that thinks about things in a similar way, which is partially why I like doing this podcast with you. But it's purely selfish, like that you're not watching the show. I want you to watch the show so that we can talk about it. Like that's the real reason. It's not even that I think it's good and I think you should watch it because it's of a high quality. It's totally selfish. It's just I want someone to talk to about the show. So
I totally get it. I do that all the time with you too. Like I pressure you to buy games and.
Yes,
because I want to talk
you want
about
someone to talk to you about
with
it.
You. Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, like the only reason I bring all of this up, I just thought it would be interesting to dive into because it's such a popular show, and I'm sure a lot of people listening like it, and I'm sure some people don't like it or haven't watched it at all. So, I think it's interesting to hear like a differing opinion. There are plenty of things that are really popular in pop culture that I do not enjoy, like the Beatles, for example. But that's like a whole other thing. So, kind of before we move into all the E3 games, do you just want to catch up with you, like what stuff you've been playing, what you've been watching lately?
Well, I just finished Wollender. It's a show on BBC. They have it on Netflix.
Right. We watched the first 2 episodes when you were in town.
Right, and they're like hour-and-a-half episodes, and it's 3 episodes a series, and it's not a season. It's it's British, so it's series. And so
I have to do everything different.
Yeah.
Or I guess probably we have to. America is the one that's different
because we came after and we are doing a terrible job. So I finally finished it, and I'll be really interested to talk with you on podcast or off podcast about the last couple episodes of that show and how it ends, because it is, to use your term, a slow burn, definitely, because they're about twice as long as an episode of any other normal cop drama detective story. And so a lot of those episodes do have slow parts, but I feel like they really effectively use that time for expanding on his character and giving him teaching moments. So I just thought it was really interesting. And there's a little thing from our personal life that kind of crops up as a topic throughout the show. And so that hit me a lot harder than it might other people for the last couple episodes. So I'm interested to see what you have to say about it. So finished watching that, and then in terms of what,
but you would recommend?
Yes,
you would recommend
absolutely. I think. Oh God, what is his name? What's the lead actor?
Kenneth Branagh.
Yes, Kenneth Branagh. It's a fabulous job. And really, I mean, even the supporting cast is super talented.
For me, I mean, having only seen the first 2 episodes, I will continue to watch it. I was interested enough in it, and knowing that you finished it and are curious to hear my thoughts, like that'll help me drive me through. I mean, I will just say, as someone who watches a lot of those kind of more, not existential is not the word, but like intellectual detective kinds of shows, a lot of those come out of Britain, honestly. As someone who's seen a lot of those, to me, Wallander, I don't know that it stands up super high compared to some other ones like Marcella that I've seen, but like for me at least, it's good enough that I will continue to watch, but not something I would want to binge watch because the episodes are so long, because it is pretty slow and it's a fairly sedate kind of show. It's not actiony a lot of times, so it's definitely a slow burn. Yeah,
I mean, it has those action breakout moments, and I honestly think those are done pretty well, and they don't feel out of place, but yeah, I would recommend it, and I think everything you said about it's fair. In terms of what I've been playing, the Enderall mod for Skryim. So what the Enderall mod does is it takes Skryim, changes a few of the base mechanics of it, and has an entirely different continent full of quests and stories and characters and NPCs and all that stuff. So it's a different continent. So you have to start a different character for Enderall, and it's massive and it's impressive too. As a community generated piece of content, it's very impressive.
And is it final? I know it's been in like beta for a really long time, but is it like fully released? They're done making updates to it?
I think so.
I've been following it for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's the understanding I had when I downloaded it, is that it's done. You know, there's still going to be bug fixing it and stuff every now and then. Sure. But in terms of content complete, I think it is. And it has this interesting.
Does it feel familiar to Skyrrim? Like, I know you said you make a new character and there are, new things to do and see, and the assets are different, but like, is the core of it still the same, the core gameplay loop?
Yeah, totally. The only thing that's different is the magic system has been overhauled. So, I mean, you can't just like double lightning blast every enemy. There's a thing called Arcane Fever that goes up as you use magic, and you kind of need to manage that. Because if your Arcane Fever gets too high, there are all these negative effects, and I think you eventually die. And there are certain areas that are full of mana, like mana pockets, where if you go into them, it raises your Arcane Fever.
You go full Palpatine.
Kind of. I think more you just super die.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting, and so that it's a core gameplay mechanic that you're managing throughout, and there's some interesting. I'm not super far in it, but it seems like there's an interesting bit of story around that Arcane Fever and what it's doing to the population of that continent. So it's really neat. It's extremely hard though, because
oh sure,
like you don't get healing spells right away, and the way you learn spells is a little different, right? It's not like the Celestial skill tree or whatever. You have to find books for that stuff, so you have to actually quote unquote learn it.
That still exists in Skyrrim. Like you find a book that will teach you a spell.
Oh yeah, you're right. No, that's the way it's always been, right? You just can you get more damage and stuff through.
The leveling up is different.
Yeah. Yeah, and as far as I've seen, that Celestial stuff is not in Enderall. I think it's handled differently.
Okay.
But yeah,
is there any indication of like how long the game is? Like, is it a full standalone? Like this, you could sink hundreds of hours into this.
It looks like it.
Jeez,
I mean, because it's a big map with a lot of stuff to do. Yeah. I mean, I've probably only sunk about 4 or 5 hours into it, and it is very difficult. I've actually considered bringing it down to easy because the enemies are just leveled a little higher, and the loot that you get early on is not great. So it's been a really, really big struggle to get through some areas. I mean, I've only died once, but it's been a close shave many times. And I wouldn't say that Skyrim is the best feeling game to play in terms of combat, and this is no different. It still has the base mechanics. So, but it's really interesting. Obviously it's a mod. You can download it from their website, and it launches separately. I've also started playing The Scourge on PS4, which is like robot Dark Souls, like sci-fi Dark Souls.
By the developers of Lords of the Fallen,
Lords of the Fallen, yeah. And I played about half of Lords of the Fallen. I really enjoyed it because I thought it was a little more accessible than something like Dark Souls. They streamlined some of the menu things. Actually, a lot of the menu parts felt a little Diablo-esque, but they streamlined things and made it a little more user-friendly, which I appreciated. But I don't know that the bosses necessarily had the difficulty to them either, which is the whole big thing about Dark Souls, like the super difficult bosses. And I mean, the ones in Lords of Fallen weren't easy, but they were by no stretch of the imagination a Dark Souls boss. And it seems like this is very similar, but the way it handles gear and upgrades and crafting and all that kind of stuff is very different than Lords of the Fallen. And I've been enjoying it so far. I mean, I got to the first boss, the first big boss, I should say, and I haven't beaten him yet. I only tried it a few times, and then I just haven't come back to it since. But I really am looking forward to going back and jumping in, because I don't not like the Souls games. I just always hit a wall somewhere, and whether it's a boss or it's a super difficult area, and then some other game comes along that I play instead.
Did you play Bloodborne?
Yes. No.
Okay.
No, I watched someone. Maybe I did. I really can't remember. I know I've watched 2 whole playthroughs of that game.
Okay.
And then I've seen a couple of my friends play certain bosses and like seen how their play styles are super different from each other, and that's interesting.
Right.
But I don't know that I've actually played Bloodborne.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I totally appreciate the Souls series and Bloodborne and that genre of game. It's just not for me. Like, the limited resources I have to play games now and the amount of games I want to play, I just, the thought of banging my head against a wall for hours and hours and hours just to beat a single boss is just not what I'm looking for.
Right.
But I like the world of the Scourge looked cool to me. Like when it was first announced and I first saw a trailer, not knowing that it was Souls-esque, I was super interested.
Yeah.
And then once I saw like, oh, it's by the people that made Lords of the Fallen, which I already heard was kind of like lesser Dark Souls, and then it was going to be very similar in structure and combat, I was just like, nah, not really for me.
Yeah, it has a lot of familiar elements for those types of games, but the combat I think is tweaked in maybe a positive way, where you target individual body parts, and
Sure.
certain enemies are armored in certain areas, and so
Yeah.
you're targeting those body parts, that aren't armored, so you take them down faster, and yada yada yada. It's neat, and it's unsettling, some of the things they do with some of the enemies and areas, and
Okay.
I think they do a good job with that Souls-esque formula. I think they do enough different to make them stand apart from the core games and all the kind of wannabe games. I would definitely put it in as like a B tier title, but I think there's like I talked about either last podcast or the one before. I enjoy games where the ambition and intent and creativity of the developer shines through, and Lords of the Fallen and the Scourge both have that in spades. So,
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend it. If you're into those types of games, obviously, if you're not, don't. But if you're into those kinds of games and you can get it on sale, I would highly recommend it. But that's mostly what I've been playing. I've been reading a lot of Star Wars comics.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm finally completely caught up. Well, because I only buy trades. I don't buy single issues. I think
Right.
I have every new canon Star Wars trade.
For Star Wars, Vader, Poe Dameron.
Star Wars,
have you read,
Vader.
like,
I have all the
did
one-off
you read like the
things,
limited runs?
like the
Lando,
Leia, the Lando, Han,
Chewie.
Solo, Chewie.
Okay, I haven't read the Han Solo one yet.
That one's pretty
that's one
cool.
of the one I didn't pick up. I thought Leia was okay. I liked the Lando one. The Chewbacca one I did not enjoy particularly.
I think the Leia one was probably my least favorite, just because I thought her as a character was actually kind of annoying. I don't think they wrote her very well.
I liked the story concept around her, because like the whole plot is this is post Alderaan being exploded, and so she's trying to go around and collect all the Alderaanian people she can to try to reignite that culture. And so it just the story kind of follows that, which I liked. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the narrative through line for that. Shattered Empire. So
yes,
the thing
I read
wanted
that quite a while ago.
Yeah, the thing
that
I
was
wanted
before
to touch
Force
on,
Awakens, wasn't it?
Maybe. The thing I wanted to touch on with that is there's a character in Shattered Empire called the Emperor's. What is it? Emperor's. God. It's they're in like a red.
Emperor's God.
They're in a red suit, and they have that screen on their helmet that shows the Emperor's face, the Emperor's voice. Is that what they're called?
I don't recall.
Or the speaker or something.
I can picture what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that character's in Shattered Empire, and in the trailer for Battlefront 2's campaign, that character is in that campaign talking to the main chick. So that's kind of
neat.
a cool tie-in. And so the whole deal with the Emperor's voice, I'm just going to call it the Emperor's voice because I can't remember the real name. That person or alien, whatever it may be, it's under a mask. They go around giving orders to Imperials as if the Emperor were still alive and telling them to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so I have a feeling that's where the main antagonist chick from the Battlefront 2 campaign is going to be getting her orders from, from this person pretending the emperor is still alive.
Well, and that was two thoughts on this, because that was a plot point, or a similar plot point, from like way back in the day, old Star Wars books before they erased all of that, where after the, post Return of the Jedi, the Emperor had cloned himself, or there was a clone of the Emperor that kind of took over the Empire and tried to keep the remnant around, and kind of had seduced Luke to the dark side for a while. So that was like a big point that they explored in the book. So not surprised they're doing something a little similar in the new canon. But
yeah,
also,
I don't think there's going to be a clone. I think it's just someone using the Emperor's face.
But just the idea of like, quote unquote, the Emperor is still around kind of a mentality. But the larger point, which I think is like a huge net positive for this new process of Star Wars, is that everything is canon. Everything ties into one another.
Yeah.
Because that's something that really, like, the old stuff really suffered from. And we'll see how they can maintain that moving forward once there are more and more pieces that need to stay together.
Right.
But that was always, it made the Star Wars stuff so new reader unfriendly, because there were so many things that relied on other things and things that kind of contradicted with this other thing, and it just made it really confusing, even for someone as hardcore as I was, to always know what mattered and what didn't. Totally. Especially when you had like actual canon, which was like George Lucas approved canon, then you had expanded universe canon, and it was just messy and made it hard as a Star Wars fan to be able to keep up with everything. So that I'm really excited about, to see how they can continue to use all of those pieces together.
Yeah, I agree. And like the whole clone trope was used so many times in old canon. Like, and so I feel like that's why I think that's actually kind of a source of a lot of the confusion in things and the contradictions that happened in old canon. And so I think Disney is going to want to stay away from the whole clone bit for a little while have But I don't know. We'll see. So what about you?
Oh, man. Well, going back to the Game of Thrones conversation, we have been rewatching some of the recent seasons just to prep for season 7. So we're currently watching through season 6, which is now only the second time I've seen it. And as like a book reader, it's just really fun to go back and watch it, having like no context for what was coming. Like everything that was happening was new and a surprise. So that it's just really fun to relive that, and makes me excited for season 7, because that will all be, completely brand new stuff as well.
Okay.
I also recently I've been trying to make a big effort to watch more movies, and Redbox has actually been a really good outlet for this, because we have one that's really close to our house. And I mean, you can rent it's like you can rent a DVD for like $1.50, Blu-ray's like $2, and you just rent it for a night and bring it back, which is just such a cheap way to rent movies. And I mean, we have Netflix, we have Hulu, we have Amazon Prime, and so they have a lot of things available on there. But when it comes to like really recent stuff, you can't always find them on Netflix, for example. So recently rented The Magnificent Seven, starring Denzel Washington and Chris Pratt's remake of an old 60s Western. It was good. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't like amazing when it comes to kind of the Western action movies. It wasn't like super special, but it was a really good time. And I watched that shortly after watching The Great Wall, which is a recent Matt Damon movie. Takes place in I can't remember if it's China or Japan, but it's like the Great Wall was made. Yeah, you're right, because it's the Great Wall of China. I'm a fucking idiot. So, like the whole concept is the Great Wall of China was built to keep out this like alien horde that attacks China every 60 years. And so like there's this whole army that exists to repel them. And Matt Damon, and also Pedro Pascal, who, if you don't know who that is, he played Oberyn Martell on Game of Thrones, and also is one of the leads on the phenomenal Netflix show Narcos. But he's in it as well as Matt Damon's buddy, and they come in from Spain and kind of discover this plot and this kind of defensive war that's happening. So they kind of get embroiled in everything and trying to help these guys out. And that movie was a mess. It was just
it
like
really was
visually, because the Chinese director who did it, he directed the movie Hero and I believe House of Flying Daggers years and years ago, and those are just like phenomenal Chinese action movies. Lots of like awesome sword fighting and just great visuals, great plays with color and scale and kind of like the splendor of these like ancient Chinese times. And all of that still exists in the Great Wall, but like the story of it and really just the concept itself is just real bad.
It's a bad
so that
time.
movie was not good. But after that, I watched Magnificent Seven, and that was kind of like a nice, like, oh, you know, there's not much to this movie,
Palate
but at least
cleanser.
it's fun. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Yeah, I have Magnificent Seven ready to watch, and I think my girlfriend and I are going to watch it pretty soon.
Definitely recommend it. Like, especially if you like westerns and like modern takes on it. And I mean, Chris Pratt's great in it. He's just super charming. But also recently watched the new quote unquote live action Beauty and the Beast. And that movie's real bad. Like real bad. There is literally no reason for that movie to exist. And I came to that realization after, because I watched it with my wife. We were both excited about it because it obviously made a fuck ton of money. It's like top 10 all-time grossing, which seems bizarre considering it's a remake.
Some people might say too much money.
Movie. Well, yeah, sure. But, like, a lot of people came down on both sides of the fence. A lot of people really loved it, and a lot of people really didn't like it. But a lot of friends that I have enjoyed it, especially people that are involved in, like, the entertainment community. So I was like, oh, cool. I'm excited to see, like, how they've changed some of the songs, what the transition to live action has done for a lot of, like, the characters and the visuals. And turns out, not much, because fucking everything in that movie is CG and green screen and bullshit, and it looks terrible. And Emma Watson is so boring in that movie. No personality. Really? She sounds like a robot when she sings because it's very clear. Like, and I'm not saying any of this to like poke fun or be mean. I'm just giving like criticism about it. It was very clear that they produced her vocal tracks a lot after the fact, which I think just choke. Like, she's probably not that strong of a singer. She certainly could carry a tune, but like no emotion or really breath support to her singing, and so they just had to manipulate it a lot, and it's like she sounds like a robot. Like, it sounds like it's been auto-tuned, and it's just totally flies in the face of the story and the world of that universe. And like, there were a couple new songs, a couple new scenes, just none of them really added any value. And just like after watching it, I looked over at my wife and I was just like, there's literally no reason for this movie to exist. Nothing they did new was good, and none of the stuff they recreated was as good or better than in the animated version.
What did she have to say about it?
I mean, she agreed with me. It was just like, we just felt like we wasted our time watching it. And I am glad, I'm glad that I watched it, just because I feel like, as someone who loves the original and cares about quote unquote musicals in movie form, I think that it's like an important thing that helps, you know, keep a lot of my friends working like in the musical theater world.
Right.
I'm glad that I watched it, but it just was not good. But yeah, I mean, those are quick hot takes on some 2016 movies, or I guess The Great Wall. The Great Wall, I think, came out this year.
I think it did,
I mean,
yeah.
If you're interested in reading more of my thoughts, I have reviews for those on my website, SheaHatesEverything.com, so you can check those out. But beyond that, I've been rewatching Parks and Rec. That show's just fucking phenomenal, and it sucks because when I originally watched it, when it first came out, I really wanted to give it a try, because I was a huge fan of The Office and a huge fan of Greg Daniels, who's one of the co-creators, and Michael Schur, who was an executive producer on The Office, and those two kind of teamed up to make Parks and Rec. I really like Amy Poehler. I think that she's, you know, a really important female presence both in the comedy world and also societally, kind of like as a big push for feminism in entertainment, and we definitely need a lot of those like leaders, and I think she's a really good one of those.
Yeah,
I wanted to support the show, but I watched the first season, I was just like, this isn't good. I don't like it. It's not funny. I don't like a lot of the characters, and it felt so derivative of The Office. Like, it's the same kind of mockumentary style. It has the same semi-lovable but embarrassing main character, and like even the supporting cast felt very familiar. It didn't really feel that unique. And I mean, it takes place in rural Indiana, which, you know, we were both born in Indiana, and it's a special place in my heart. And they poke fun at the state a lot and kind of the Hicksville attitude a lot, which I didn't always appreciate. But so when I first watched it, I kind of wrote it off, didn't go back to it. And then once I started working with some other people in the Atlanta area, they were saying really good things about it. And this was, I think it was like after season 6 had aired, so the show was almost over. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go back and watch it. Went and rewatched the first season, still didn't like it, but I decided, you know, I'm just going to push through. Started watching through season 2, still wasn't super into it. And then they made a huge casting change where kind of the main male character and the love interest for Amy Poehler's character left the show. And they brought on 2 new characters, one played by Rob Lowe and the other played by Adam Scott of Party Down fame. I fucking love Adam Scott. And so I was excited to see those two on the show, and they just really, really just reinvigorated the life of the show. And season 3 had this really awesome overarching storyline where they were kind of trying to save their Parks and Rec department through this big harvest festival. And it really gave a good opportunity for all the characters to really come together and work together against this kind of outside force of this budget deficit. And I just really enjoyed that arc of the show. And really from there on out, just the show, it's so good. And it just sucks that the first season was not good, and then even the most of the second season it was really struggling to build its legs, and I feel like that kind of contributed to the show always being a little under the radar. And I know like almost every season they didn't know whether or not they were going to be renewed, and that just, I imagine, is really tough on the people working on the show to not know if you're going to have a job next year every season. But it also kind of created this underdog mentality for the people on the show that really translated to the characters on the show, because that's who they are. Like they're a bunch of, this group of misfit underdogs kind of trying to make the best of this bad situation. And I just think that it really comes together really, really well. Those are really long thoughts on a show that ended like 4 years ago, but I fucking love Parks and Rec. And as yet another plug for my website, I have a ranking of all the 7 seasons. Pretty obvious that season 1 came out in last place from what I'm saying, but just a really fun read. And especially if you have seen bits of the show or want to check it out, I think it's a good read because it kind of tells you a little bit of where the story goes throughout. And I can't speak highly enough of the way that show goes, and especially what it does for the relationships of the characters. Too often in modern sitcoms, and it's been a problem going back decades, is that the male characters a lot of times get the spotlight and the female characters kind of serve as their love interests and their support systems and don't often get stories of their own. And I think Parks and Rec does a phenomenal job of flipping the script on that, not only by having the main character be a female character, but really highlighting the other female characters in the office, giving them their own storylines and making their success kind of a priority and something that you want to invest in. So I just think it's a really important show for people that are looking for more kind of a female-centric voice on television. So now that I've talked about freaking Parks and Rec for 20 minutes, I guess the only other game that I've been playing in addition to Horizon Zero Dawn, I played through the first episode of Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, how was that?
I didn't care for it, honestly, and it makes me sad because I loved the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, loved the second one as well.
Yeah, me too.
And I really liked that cast of characters. They were never like my thing in the comic book universe, but like I knew of them and I'd read some of the comics, and I've gotten a little more into it since falling in love with the characters in the movies. And I'm also, I'm a fan of Telltale's games. I think that they have a lot of problems when it comes to the technical side that hold back some of their games. And certainly from a workflow perspective, I think they just work on too many projects. They have too many things coming out, and they all follow a very similar structure. So it's really hard to like pick and choose what I want to play. But because it was Guardians of the Galaxy, I wanted to check it out. And I was just really unimpressed. I think that comedy is a phenomenally hard thing to get right in video games because comedy is so dependent on timing. And when you take the timing out of the hands of the joke deliverer and put it in the hands of the audience, that makes it really hard for a joke to flow well.
Yes.
And I think there have been very few games that have nailed it. I think South Park Stick of Truth is a good example of a game that did nail it. And Guardians of the Galaxy does not nail that.
That's a bummer. I've heard from multiple people that their Tales from the Borderlands series is actually really funny and good.
Tales from the Borderlands was great. Yeah. It was great.
So that's a shame.
One of my favorite games from that year.
Well, at least the first episode of this kind of falls a little flat.
Right. And the second one is out. I have it. I haven't played it yet. I will play it soon because I want to kind of keep, like, I will. After playing the first episode, like, I'm not interested. I'm kind of done. But I'm willing to play through the second episode just to give it another chance. And we'll see how that goes. But I definitely will play that soon, partially because I want to talk about it on the podcast. Partially, I don't want to, like, if I wait any longer, I will just give up. So I need to go ahead and play it.
Right.
So I want it to improve. I haven't really seen anything online to make me feel like it has improved with the second episode. but we'll see what happens. It's just, I don't know. It definitely bummed me out after playing it. I had a lot higher expectations than they were able to deliver. So
yeah, that's a bummer. But yeah, maybe it'll have an upswing for the second episode. Who knows?
Right. And I mean, their stuff has been fairly inconsistent. I think a lot of their stuff's been really good. I mean, the first season of Walking Dead was awesome. Wolf Among Us was awesome. Tales from the Borderlands was awesome. But they've had a lot of stuff that didn't hit me as hard. I know the second season of Game of Thrones, not Game of Thrones, but Walking Dead, I wasn't super interested. And like the Game of Thrones series they put out, I didn't really think was all that great. I know you stopped playing it after the first episode.
Yeah, because the character that I cared about immediately died at the end of the first episode, and so I was like, well, I mean, it's another one of these. This just reinforces my opinion about the show. Yeah.
I mean, you can't blame it for following a similar structure, but it's one of those, like, if you didn't like it here, you're not going to like it here.
Exactly, and I tried it. I gave it its due.
Yeah, for sure.
And Absolutely. Like I'm partway through the Batman Telltale series. I need to finish it.
Completely forgot about that.
Yeah, and like I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. I just haven't gone back to it for some reason.
Yeah, I definitely mean to play that. I have that, and I also have their Minecraft series.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The Minecraft in particular, because Kelly, my wife, she doesn't play a lot of games. One of the few games that she enjoys playing with me co-op is Minecraft, but she also likes watching the Telltale games and like the kind of a more adventure game style. She watched me play through both seasons of Walking Dead, and she watched me play through Game of Thrones as well. And so like Minecraft's one that I've been saving because I know she's going to want to watch through it with me because it's Minecraft and it's Telltale. So it's just one of those where like we haven't taken the time to sit down together and play through it, but I definitely will. And I know Patton Oswalt plays the main character, and I love Patton Oswalt, so
he does a nice job.
I'm definitely excited for that.
They actually they have a lot of voice actors that do a nice job in that one. I think that one's a little better than it has any right to be, than it should be.
Sure.
And I'm excited they've announced a second season for it, so cool. I'll go ahead and pick that up. But they because I used to do a video game website thing, and so I have an email address that gets sent all these news and stuff, and I occasionally would get free copies of games and all that. And Telltale is actually a developer or a publisher that still sends me free copies of their seasons. So I recently got a free copy of Walking Dead New Frontier, since that has concluded. And so I have that downloaded, and it's on my computer. I need to play through it. Because I beat season 2, and I'm a little more heavily invested in. Well, that sounds like a dumb thing to say now that I can't remember her name. The Clementine. Thank you. I knew it was a fruit.
Well, and you're a big Walking Dead fan as well.
Yeah, definitely more so the comics, but yeah. So I'm excited to check out New Frontier and see what's up with that. But yeah, so I have Batman New Frontier, and that makes me a little sad about Guardians of the Galaxy, but I'm under the impression that I might never have to buy another Telltale game, so I'm just going to wait on all their games and see if I can get them
until they realize, like, wait,
this guy's not writing about our games anymore.
Then you should just forward it to me. I'll write about it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so there's a good wrap-up of everything we've been playing, watching, reading. So I guess we're going to move on to talking about some E3 games while it's still relevant. So first on the list, we want to talk about the Microsoft press conference. And obviously the biggest part of that was the official unveiling of the Xbox One X. And I need to make sure I enunciate well when I'm talking about that. Xbox One X. But we obviously have opinions on that, but I feel like those opinions are also informed by a lot of the games that were shown. So we'll wait and talk about the actual console at the very end. But as far as the games shown goes, the first piece was Forza 7. I think it was obvious for them to not only announce the game, but also showcase it on the Xbox One X. Racing games are a very easy technical showpiece because there just isn't as much going on. So it's so simple to focus on them cars look good and showing some nice wet roads, like, oh yeah, them wet roads and them cars, yeah.
This one loves the slop. She eats up the slop. She eats it.
She's a mutter. She's born to slop.
Mutter was a mutter?
Her mother was a mutter. Father was a mutter. But as far as the actual game goes, I know both you and I aren't like super hardcore into the racing genre. I know you are more interested in Need for Speed Payback, but like any opinion specifically on Forza 7?
I think It is good for the fans.
Fans of the genre will enjoy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, my bigger piece was, and this is kind of talking about the system in general. I totally get why they showed that game first. It was more just like there wasn't enough other stuff. Like,
right.
Yes, Forza 7 looks awesome on Xbox One X, and they kind of showed, not at the conference, but afterwards, they've shown some comparison between it running on an S and running on an X, and it's obvious. It really highlights just how good games look on the X. But like, as far as a system justification, that being the big showpiece, I'm not sure it was totally there.
No.
The other big kind of X showcase was Crackdown 3, which they announced I think a couple of years ago, and now just like I'm finally really talking about it. You're excited for it?
Yeah, so like I have semi-fond memories of the first Crackdown, just playing it with one of my friends. And I think Terry Crews is great, and it's like this is honestly, it's the only way they could have gotten me to buy Crackdown 3 was to have Terry Crews in the game, and they put him in the game, and I'd like, it's ridiculous that Terry Crews is the main protagonist of a video game, but of course he's the main protagonist of a video game. So I don't know. I think it looks like a lot of silly fun, and it looks great. It looks like true to that graphical style that they established in the past couple games. And so I think there's going to be an audience for that.
And I was kind of surprised. I didn't feel like the graphics looked all that impressive. And I know the destructibility and the scale is more of the selling point, especially on the X.
Sure.
But like, I think kind of that more cel-shaded look, and I know it's consistent with the earlier games, but it almost feels like a bit of a cop-out. Like, they knew with other stuff going on, they couldn't make it look as good as maybe they wanted it to, and so they're kind of falling back on this more stylized look. And that's just like totally gut feel. It's based on nothing, but I just feel like this whole rhetoric of the Xbox One X is the most powerful console ever. Like, first of all, fucking duh. Almost every console that has ever come out has been the most powerful console when it comes out. That's the whole point. Up until this point, the PS4 Pro has been the most powerful console. Like, that duh. But kind of on a larger scale, I still feel like the fact that it is a console, it is a plug-and-play device, you don't have to be a PC expert to use it, I think is great. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. But I think the larger thing is it really highlights that even with these crazy, teraflops and processors and all these other terms that I don't fully understand, games aren't going to look as good on a console as they will on a PC. Because even like if you look at Crackdown 3 on an X versus running on a high-end PC, it's still like nowhere close. Yeah. And I just feel like to constantly chase this PC mentality, I feel like it's a mistake. I don't know.
I totally agree. I mean, they should absolutely be riding the coattails of the PC gaming community in terms of hardware and everything. Yeah. But that should not be their push. Like, that shouldn't be their marketing strategy is, oh, look, we're almost as powerful as a PC. Like, that doesn't get you anywhere, right? So, and all it does is earn you, like, derision from the PC community, which is an awful community anyways. But, and, like, it's expensive. Like, yes, you can go out and say most, powerful console, whatever, buzzword. But, like, that's a lot of money when you compare it to the PS4 Pro. And they don't bother with exclusives at Microsoft anymore, it feels like. Right. And any exclusives they do have are Play Anywhere, so you can just fucking buy it on PC where it runs better. Like, that's what I did with Gears of War 4. I didn't buy it on my Xbox One. I bought it on my PC because it runs really, really well. I didn't want some shitty version that looked nice but was capped at 30. I want a version that looks nice and runs unlimited frames. Like,
and I mean, for someone like me, like, I have a PC, I can play games on my PC. It's certainly not powerful. And so for me, I also like the simplicity of console. So if I have an option, I want to play it on a console. So like, if I had an Xbox One, I would want to play the Xbox games on an Xbox One, not on a PC. I'm fine giving up some of the graphical fidelity and like some of the optional support, like mods and stuff like that, for the simplicity of it. But I don't feel like I'm representative of like a significant portion of gamers that have both, because that's really the core of what we're talking about. And like, people that own a PS4 and have a PC or just have a PC, I feel like most of those people, if given the option, will play on PC because it looks so much better. Like, if you're going to invest in that system and it's so fucking expensive to have a good PC, you're going to want to use it as much as possible. It just seems like a weird strategy if you're trying to sell consoles to have all these games be available on PC. I think from a consumer perspective, it's amazing. Like,
yeah,
huge props to them from a consumer perspective of letting people, like theoretically, I could play basically every game that Microsoft is going to put out without having to buy their console. Like, that's awesome for me. I don't see how that's awesome for Microsoft.
Me
it doesn't
neither.
make me feel invested in your community and your, like, mindset of being an Xbox gamer. Like, I am a PC gamer who is also playing some Microsoft games. It just seems weird to me.
Yeah.
But I feel like at the core of it, I think Phil Spencer does care about gamers. I really like him. And the bigger thing is, like, I'm not a business expert when it comes to this, and I have to imagine that people much smarter than me are making this decision with some kind of plan. It's more just like, I don't get the plan right now, and therefore, why are you, like, one, why did you put out the Xbox One S? And two, why are you now putting out this more powerful Xbox One X that's like almost PC level? Like, who is it for, really? I don't get who it's for.
I feel like Microsoft, just because, like, the general sense that I get from them, you know, they're no longer Sony versus Microsoft. Like, they've completely eliminated that kind of language from any public face that they have. And I feel like this is almost a stopgap measure towards, like, maybe Microsoft just doesn't do consoles anymore. They do some sort of in-house PC, like pre-built PCs kind of thing with a more console-like user interface. That's the sense of what I like. That's my theory towards, like, what they're moving towards is some sort of a console PC hybrid where it's, you get the benefit and ease of use of the user interface in a console, but also the feature set and the power of a PC. And I feel like this is maybe a step in that direction, as well as, you know, their whole Play Anywhere thing. They just want people to be able to play their games. And
yeah, sure.
Like, that's why, because otherwise that marketing strategy doesn't make sense other than just straight goodwill with your consumer base. Yeah. Because otherwise that marketing strategy doesn't make sense. And a lot of the language around the Xbox One X has been a little confusing, just in terms of whether or not they actually want you to buy this thing. I feel and, like, even Phil Spencer, like, I've seen some things where it's like, yeah, it's probably not for everyone. Which, like, that's fair of him. Like, that's fair of him to say.
It like, that's the truth, absolutely. Yeah. And I appreciate the honesty of that, but it still doesn't answer the question of, like, okay, but then why? Like,
and then why are you doing it?
Right. I have heard that their Elite controller has done well. Like, they've sold a lot of them. It's like that super crazy customizable $150 controller that is a very niche thing. And I think, like, if that's their attitude with the Xbox One X, is this is a very niche thing for people that are looking for this very specific experience, it just seems weird that they're pushing it so hard. Like, why are they not talking as much about the S? Like, that, if that's their go forward platform is the Xbox One S, why aren't they marketing that as the primary platform? It feels like the X is what they're marketing as their primary platform, and that definitely doesn't make sense from a financial perspective, because the thing's so fucking expensive that it takes away a huge amount of potential sales. And two, like, from a usability perspective, I'm not seeing the value. Like, as someone who lives outside of the Xbox ecosystem right now, I am not seeing the value from a software perspective of buying an S, much less spending twice as much to get an X.
I 110%. Yeah. I still have my original Xbox One, and, like, that thing has been in a drawer for months and months and months, and I finally, after years and years, let my gold subscription drop because I just don't play that.
You're just not using it.
Yeah, and, like, you know, like I said, I got Dead Rising 4 and Gears of War 4 on my PC, and I play them, and they run great. And for me, it's maybe not necessarily about the change in graphical fidelity. It's about frame rate for me, because like I said before, you know, I was playing Dishonored 2. I think I might have said this last episode, but, like, it was giving me a headache on PS4 because the frame rate was so low in areas. So on the Steam sale today, Dishonored 2 is $20 on the Steam sale. So I went ahead and bought it on the Steam sale. I still have my PS4 copy, but like I want to play it where I'm not gonna get a fucking headache playing it, and like I don't know, because that Xbox One X, that honestly might be slightly more powerful than my current PC, but it's not $500 more powerful, you know?
Sure.
And
yeah,
like,
I mean, if you already have something that's doing close to the job, why invest in something new?
Exactly.
Which is really like the core problem with the Xbox One X in the first place.
Right.
Like if I'm someone that owns an S and I can buy an X for $500 and all it's going to do is make my games look better, you know, some might be significantly better, but the vast majority, the multi-platform games and the smaller games, there's not going to be a huge amount of difference because they have to develop for the lowest common denominator. Like, why am I going to spend $500 for that? It just seems weird. But again, we're not business experts. And I do want to like highlight, because we're still new in this podcasting thing with, you know, our listeners. Both you and I tend to fall down on the Sony side of things. We've been in that ecosystem longer.
Yeah.
Like I owned a 360. I know you did as well. And we certainly want both to succeed because it's only good for the industry. We tend to fall in line more with Sony's software offerings. We like those games more typically. But I do want to highlight, I want to highlight that because obviously it gives our a sense of perspective, but also say to not be on the fanboy side. Like, I do not see value in the PS4 Pro either. Like,
no, I mean,
that is not like
unless you're doing PSVR.
Sure, absolutely, 100%. But I mean, that's a whole other point. I'm not seeing a ton of value in the PSVR either. So
right, but when you have like a Rift or the Oculus available,
yeah. Or just in general, because I haven't seen it. I'm willing to give it a try, but you know, I've heard the software experiences aren't as robust as you would expect. It's obviously still an expensive peripheral to add. And when you compare it to the offerings available on something like an Oculus, like from a fidelity perspective, the PS4 is the VR comes nowhere near that. So it's just kind of one of those like middle tier things of like, if I'm going to spend that money, why not just spend a couple of $100 extra? But I feel like we have a lot of thoughts on current state of consoles and PC and VR.
Yeah,
so
maybe
I
that's
feel like
best
this is a whole other topic. Yes. So kind of walking through just really quickly now some of the other big hitters from the Microsoft conference. They showed off some more gameplay of Sea of Thieves, which I think looks really cool. It's nice to see Rare back making Rare style games. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious like how many of the legit Rare people there are still there
I don't know.
in leadership, because they've been out of the limelight for so long working on just shitty Kinect games that it's kind of like, is this really still the Rare that we know and love? But what I've seen of Sea of Thieves certainly looks fun. We both love pirates, which is great. The kind of exploratory nature of the game that they seem to be making is awesome. It seems a little simple to me, like the actual mechanics of the game, the combat, moving around, it all feels a little geared towards a younger audience. But like, I'm certainly willing to give it a try.
I definitely think there are some core gameplay loop features that are missing or have not been shown. Like, you know, what do you do with the treasure? Now, I hear you upgrade the ship, but if you lose your ship when it goes down, do the upgrades stay? Like, is that your ship that spawns every time, or like what's going on?
Is there really like an overarching story to this, or like a narrative story mode to this game?
Right.
Or is it totally just open? Yeah, I definitely don't have the answers to those.
So those are questions that I think need to be answered for people before anyone can answer it in some capacity before people can really start committing to the purchase. I mean, I know some people that are like, yeah, totally getting that, but right now I'm still like a 60-40 get it, not get it. Right. Because I want to know a little more about it, the experience, and what they think is worth the player's time. So.
And then also on the Microsoft exclusive, or at least timed exclusive, is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds coming to the Xbox One. Has only been on PC. They have made statements, and they being people behind PUBG have come out and said like, oh, this is coming to PS4. It's a timed exclusive. They're not talking about it right now as far as I believe. But that is at least for a time being an exclusive to the Xbox. You've played this, yes, on PC?
I just got it like a couple days ago.
Obviously, it's been a huge hit in the Giant Bomb community of both, we both subscribe to that. I've watched a bunch of videos on it. I am not good at shooters on PC. The mouse and keyboard has never been my thing, so it's not really something I'm looking at. If it comes to console, if it comes to PS4, I will 100% check it out, but not really my thing. But definitely cool that it's coming to console, and that game has been a huge, huge hit, making a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that will only increase on Xbox and then PS4.
I got number 6 this morning.
Nice.
Then,
oh yeah, and if you're new, that's
and just a
good.
little bit ago, my buddy and I were doing duos, and we got number 4.
Baller.
So, getting real close to that chicken dinner,
Close
man.
to that chicken dinner. Another game that was announced there, and I should have checked on this before we started, was Super Lucky's Tale. I'm not sure. Is that an exclusive? Are you aware?
I don't know.
That sucks. We'll have to look into that. And maybe, if you are listening and have the answer to that, you can write in a correction to info@sheahateseverything.com. Send us an email. But Super Lucky's Tale, that is it seems like a very retro style 3D platformer in the vein of something like Banjo-Kazooie or the recent Yooka-Laylee. I have a lot of opinions on Yooka-Laylee. You can find a review on my site about it. I was very underwhelmed with the way that game came out. It may be specific to that game, but the larger question is, do 3D platformers still have a place in modern gaming? So I thought Super Lucky's Tale looked really cute. I'm curious to see more and see kind of what the story of it is. It's certainly, a fun mascot platformer. It's more just even if done well, will it still be good? It's kind of that question that's up in the air that, I was really excited before Yooka-Laylee came out for this kind of thing to return, because I was a huge Spyro person, big Crash Bandicoot person, obviously still a big Ratchet and Clank person, although that's more of a third-person action platformer. But I had a thirst for a mascot platformer like that, but Yooka-Laylee has really kind of turned me off from the idea of it. So, I'm curious to see more. What are your thoughts on that, Kyle?
Yeah, I haven't gotten Yooka-Laylee yet. I'm waiting till it comes out on Switch, which is still planned, but no date on it.
Sure.
Just because I think that's a good platform for that type of genre.
Yeah.
And I've seen some pretty mixed stuff. I've heard from you about it and some other people, and so I'm kind of reserving judgment until I can get my hands on them. But I definitely think if all that they really have to it is a collectathon that's occasionally a little rough, then maybe that formula doesn't hold up anymore, because it's has been worn down with time. But if I think maybe Super Lucky's Tale, they find some way to learn from the shortcomings of that formula in the past, and they can introduce a couple more modern, ease of access, ease of life, user interface things, or who knows? I very much think that genre still has a place, but not as it was. It definitely has to evolve.
Absolutely. And that was one of the problems with Yooka-Laylee, is it felt too made for the fans of that genre. It felt too beholden to the style of those games as they used to be, and didn't iterate enough for kind of a modern sensibility of how people play games. So hopefully Super Lucky's Tale can learn from both the old games and Yooka-Laylee's mistakes and kind of progress forward. It's obviously, having seen what they showed, way too early to tell one way or the other, but at least it made me interested. And the character Lucky, he looks cute, so
yeah. Right, that's all that matters, really.
One of the other quote-unquote big games that was announced there that's an exclusive was Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and I say big in quotes because it's obviously more of an indie style game, but Ori had a huge following and had a lot of success, and people raving about it. I own it but haven't played it. I know graphically the game is absolutely gorgeous, and gameplay wise it was surprisingly brutal considering kind of the story of it and the visuals of it. So did you play through the first one?
No, I watched my friend play the vast majority of it. There are a set number of 2D platformers that I can play in a given year, and I hit that limit very quickly every year. And
there are a lot of quality 2D platformers nowadays.
Yeah, and I just get so burnt out on them. And it looked charming and fun, and like it had a lot to offer for fans of that genre. But you know, I'm not all that into it. I know the big beats of the story of the first one, and think that's a nice, heart-wrenching and heartfelt story. But yeah, that's. I bet you people will really like it.
And I mean, like, I 100% want to get to Ori and the Blind Forest at some point because of everything people have said about it, and like, I'm curious to see it. It's just one of those, like, I didn't check it out at the time, too many other things going on, but the trailer that they showed for Will of the Wisps was absolutely stunning and looks super depressing, so that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Two of the other games, and I don't remember now if these were shown at the conference or not. They've been announced in years past. Cuphead and Tacoma. Both are like really high up on my most anticipated list. Cuphead, they announced a couple years ago. It, at least at the time, was being made just by two dudes who were like hand animating everything. It's a very like old school, like 40s, 50s, like Looney Tunes, Disney style of animation. Like the old Mickey Mouse cartoons, which really, really appeals to me, and the dichotomous nature of the actual gameplay, because it's like a really hardcore side-scrolling action platformer, which I thought was really cool. And the original conceit was it was just boss battles. It was like taking only the boss battles from these side-scrolling games, and that was the whole game. But I think they've since expanded kind of the scope and the team of the game, and so there are actual regular levels, regular enemies in between to kind of make a more complete experience. And that has obviously made the game consistently be delayed and delayed and delayed. But I'm pretty sure they're still aiming for a 2017 release date. I'm sure I'm going to get my ass kicked at that game. I'm not great at the side-scrolling platformers anymore. I just don't have the reflexes I used to.
Yeah.
But super excited for that one.
Yeah, I've not seen anything else like it ever. So I'm really excited to see what new things they're bringing to it. And that'll probably be like my one 2D platformer for the year that I play.
Right. And then also, I know they showed this off the show floor. I don't remember if they had it at the conference, but Tacoma, which is made by Fulbright, the makers of Gone Home, which is one of the most like arresting video game experiences I've ever had in my entire life. I compare it a lot to my experience playing Journey as just one of those, like, I've just never seen story and character and world done in a way like this. And obviously Journey and Gone Home are very different kinds of games, but just like memories, like while I was playing it, I knew that it was an experience I would remember for the rest of my life. And so Tacoma is kind of their follow-up to Gone Home, takes place in space, and you're kind of exploring this derelict space station and learning about the inhabitants that used to be there, and figuring out like, oh, something went a little wrong here, and kind of figuring out how everything happened. And just purely on the pedigree of Fulbright alone, I'm interested. The space setting makes me even more interested. So I cannot freaking wait to play that game.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'm a big fan of that, more adventure game, quote unquote, walking simulator. I hate simulator. That term. I definitely think there's plenty there to, plenty of directions for that genre to go that are exciting, and the way it might bleed over into other more commonplace or mainstream genres, I think is for the better. I have not played Gone Home, but I've played many games similar to it. Now, the one thing I'm concerned about with Tacoma is, like, they've gone back through and like rebuilt that game from the bottom up because they weren't happy with it. So that has me a little nervous. Like, I'm a little on the fence about it.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's definitely like a valid fear. I feel like with that team in particular, I think that because their stories are so personal, like that's not a warning sign to me. Like in this specific instance, with a lot of games it would be, but knowing their process behind Gone Home, at least for me personally, I only feel like the game will come out better because of what they did.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a possibility, and I really hope that's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know it comes out August 2nd on Steam. I don't know when it's planned to come out on consoles, but
yeah, and that is one that, in addition to Cuphead, will be on PC and console exclusivity with Xbox One.
Right. Right.
Which sucks because, like, obviously I would rather play on a console, but I'm not buying an Xbox just to play a couple indie games.
Right.
So, I mean, who knows? I go back and forth on, like, if I can justify to my wife getting a new console for Christmas. You know, it's like, do I get an Xbox One so I can play something like Sunset Overdrive and play Gears 4 and not have to worry about playing some of that stuff on PC moving forward? Or do I get a Switch where I can only play those games on a Switch? It's just, it's a tough conversation.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
One of the, they also highlighted a couple games at the Microsoft conference that are not exclusives, and I was a little annoyed at some of the language they use, like
Me too.
world premiere, console exclusive, blah blah. It feels like lying and manipulating language that I really don't appreciate.
It just was.
So yeah, I mean, that I definitely do not care for. But the actual games themselves, they showed the new Life is Strange game, which I didn't at the time know that this is not being developed by Don't Nod, the makers of the first game.
Right.
They're working on the actual sequel, the season 2, I guess you would say. So this Life is Strange Before the Storm is being made by a different developer, obviously in hand with Don't Nod. But this is a prequel, focuses on not Alex, but the other character, whom I can't not remember her name.
Oh, Chloe.
But, yes, thank you, Chloe. Before she went super punk rock.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the story of like the things that led up to the first season. I fucking loved the first season of Life is Strange.
I'm glad.
One of my favorite games that came out this year. It's got off to a bit of a slow start, and there were certainly some like awkward writing moments where it definitely felt like this is a bunch of 40-year-old dudes writing for teenage characters that felt a little forced. But on the whole, like the structure of the story was so well done, even though I thought the kind of eventual reveal of who the bad guy was a little obvious. I thought the whole journey was just super phenomenal. Another great example of that telltale structure, that adventure games episodic structure being done right, and the iterative nature of it improving on what Telltale has done, I thought was really impressive. So I mean, even knowing that it's not Don't Nod, I'm super looking forward to Before the Storm.
Yeah, the other thing that I'm kind of like about it is Ashley Birch did the voice acting for Chloe in the first season. Because of the voice actors strike going on at the time, she's not coming back to reprise her role as Chloe, which is a little weird and makes me really sad because I'm a big Ashley Birch fan. I think she's, she has done a lot of positive work for inclusivity in video games and stuff. And I think she's hilarious. And also,
right? I know she used to be like a YouTube person, right?
Yeah, more or less. Because
she had I remember you talking about her years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I wasn't super familiar with her. I'd heard of her obviously, but she also did Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, and Tiny Tina in Borderlands.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep.
That's fun. That's fun. Very different characters, those two.
Yeah, sure. I mean, she's obviously talented and has a lot of breadth in terms of her vocal talent. So yeah, it's just it's a shame. That's one of the things that initially drew me to Life is Strange, because like you, I was worried, hipster bullshit. And I was like, well, Ashley Birch is doing it. I'll at least get it and play it to kind of support her and her career. And then I totally fell in love with it. And I know it's a story that, because my girlfriend watched me play it, that she and I are both pretty heavily invested in. So like we'll see how not Don't Nod, or I guess Do Nod, are able to. That's what we're gonna call them now. Said no one ever. We'll see how they handle the IP.
Yeah, and then there were two other big games that were shown at the Microsoft stage that are not exclusive. One of which was actually revealed, being Metro Exodus, which I did not anticipate there being another Metro game.
Me neither.
Sure.
That blew my fucking mind because I love those games.
It was one of those where because I didn't play 2033 at first, and I know you were a big fan of it, but once they were showing Last Light, I was like, oh, this looks really cool, I want to play this. I'll also go back and play 2033. I thought Last Light was better from a gameplay perspective, but like that game had such a finality to the story. Like I was like, and plus neither of them were like phenomenally successful. They were both like B-tier games,
right?
At least in terms of like sales and people talking about them. that I was like, oh, well, this is done. Like, I hope the developer keeps doing other stuff, but this series is done. And then once they started the trailer, like within the first 10 or 15 seconds, I was like, holy shit, is this a new Metro game?
Yeah.
Because like the style of it and the visual, like the way that they showcase the world is so unique.
It is.
And I think like I'm trying to remember the way the trailer started, but it was like he comes across a dead body and like picks up like a shotgun shell, loads it into a gun or whatever, and it just felt so Metro.
Yes.
And I was like, oh hell yes. And so I'm super pumped for that game.
I am down
that is
for
one
more
of those
of
where,
that.
like, they and again, Microsoft did a really shitty job of like saying what the game actually is.
Yep.
Because like a bunch of questions afterwards were like, oh fuck, is this game Xbox exclusive? Like, that sucks. 2033 was a 360 exclusive, but then Last Light was available on both consoles, and so it was like, that seems kind of shitty to revert back to it being a console exclusive. But no, like, there's no exclusive content for Xbox, no timed exclusive. It's coming out on both platforms simultaneously in addition to PC. It's just like the messaging around it was just kind of shitty.
Yeah, super.
And they made it feel like it was an exclusive. But that made me very happy because I am definitely playing that game, and kind of some of the changes they've made. It's not an open world, but there are like larger open areas compared to the first two games, and that's
such a
sounds
departure.
really, really cool. It sounds like a good direction.
Because like those larger areas in the first game or the first couple games are really intense. Just like the larger outside areas in 2, where there's the flying enemies that are like sweeping around, and there's those creepy things in the water and all that. Like, oh, those are some great areas, and knowing that we're getting more of that. And the really cool thing, like, this takes place maybe a significant amount of time after the others. I don't know if you play as RTM or not, but I don't think you do, because you had your gas mask on in the tunnels, which is normal. I mean, some of the tunnels were like permeated with crap, and then you walk outside and pull the mask off, and everything's like a lot greener. Like, things are starting to regrow finally. And I was like, oh shit, this is a fucking game changer. Like, that's a big deal.
Well, it makes sense. Like, assuming it does take place however many years after it, it does make sense because the Dark Ones, is that what they were called? So like they and I won't go into spoiler territory, but they definitely set up the Dark Ones as kind of like the big enemy in the first two games. It's you don't know that much about them. They seem like this like alien somewhat race, and you don't know like, oh, did they evolve from humans? Are they something else? Blah blah blah. And they're the ones that are kind of changing the way the world atmosphere is structured.
Right.
Kyle, correct me if I'm saying any of this wrong. It's been a while, but that story resolves in the second game, and so it makes sense based upon like, if this is years later, that things would be changing. They would be going into that more revitalizing nature kind of thing. So I didn't notice that until you just said it, Kyle. But that sounds like a really cool direction story wise.
And because I always like the second one. I fucking love the second one. I thought it did a lot of things with the gameplay that improved on the first one, just in terms of quality of life stuff. The stealth became even better in the second one from the first one. And I was kind of thinking, I always thought like, if they were gonna make another Metro game, what would it be? And if to have them change something that's so fundamental to like the world, that like it's just a thing I know, like the surface sucks all the time, and like to have that fundamentally changed is kind of it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
cool.
And then the last game we have to talk about that was shown at Microsoft was Middle-earth: Shadow of War, which has obviously been previously announced, but we got to see some more stuff from the game. Did you play Shadow of Mordor?
I played a few hours of it, and it did not draw me in
I'm in
at
the
all.
same
I got
boat.
stuck on
It's
one of the
same.
bosses. I got kind of screwed over by the Nemesis system, and it was a really difficult guy to fight, and then I was like, I don't like this game enough to try and power through or figure an alternative route out, so I dropped it.
Part of it for me was like the open world fatigue. Just those games are already hard for me to get into, and there are so many of them nowadays, and it just felt so similar to like the combat felt so familiar to not the combat. The exploration felt so similar to Assassin's Creed, and the movement and the combat felt so similar to Batman.
Yeah.
Both games like I've played recently, and I was just like, it's not doing enough special. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and which is why I was interested in the first place. But like the Lord of the Rings related story, I actively disliked. Like, I hated how they integrated Gollum into the story. I hated the whole Celebrimbor storyline of like this. It felt so anti Lord of the Rings with this like superhero kind of character. Like that does not fit with the world of Lord of the Rings whatsoever. So it's not like I actively disliked the game, but it certainly didn't grab me. But with Shadow of War, not saying like I'm on board now, and I still own Shadow of Mordor. I will try to go back to it at some point and give it another shot. But with Shadow of War, some of the stuff they've changed about making the scale a little larger and giving like these kind of full-on siege kind of mentality of like, oh, you have a whole army with you at once. That all looks really, really cool.
Yeah, that seems neat. What was the Lord of the Rings game you and I played co-op?
War in the North.
Yeah, and then our save bugged out and we got screwed over. I was having a pretty good time with that game. At least playing with you.
I mean, it certainly wasn't amazing. Like the combat wasn't great, but it was just like a fun, let's play this co-op. We'll talk about random shit while we're playing. And the story in that was actually really cool. You got to follow two of Elrond's sons kind of on this like side story that's happening concurrently to the main Lord of the Rings story. So that was fun. You got to crisscross with some random characters. Like I think Legolas came in for a bit because you go to Rivendell and you talk to Elrond a bit, and then there was a story with one of the eagles that you got to free and that kind of thing. So
yeah, it's like I feel like that's a good example of kind of what to do with the story and have nods to the fans of the series and franchise. Yes. And then I don't feel like any of that was done properly in War in the North or
Shadow of Mordor. Yeah, because War in the North definitely felt like it existed in the same world. It was happening at the same time. And the Shadow of Mordor felt like it was a different universe just with the Lord of the Rings name.
Totally.
But
yeah,
just our opinion. I know a lot of people really loved that game. I know Giant Bomb gave it Game of the Year in 2014. So there's definitely something to it. Just didn't speak to us particularly. Right. So those were kind of the big Microsoft games. We already talked a lot about the Xbox One X as a system. Obviously, not something either of one of us are going to be pre-ordering as of right now. No. But maybe we'll talk more about that like as a future topic, because I think that there's a lot of discussion to be had just on the current trajectory that consoles are on. I think it'll be really interesting over the next couple of years to see if they follow more of a phone mentality where there's a new one every year, and you just kind of you don't always buy the new one. You buy one every 2 years or every 3 years, and kind of that mentality. I'll be really curious to see how that goes. But moving on, we were also going to talk about Nintendo today. Thankfully, there's a little less to talk about with Nintendo
because we're running long.
But I did want to hit on like some of the big games. So to knock two out really quickly, because we really just saw trailers that were announced. There's a new Kirby game. There's a new Yoshi game. Both side scrollers. They both feel familiar to fans of those kinds of games, but also some like new gameplay twists. I didn't have strong feelings towards either of them. Like they didn't make me particularly excited. The biggest thing was like there are more games coming out on this system. Yeah. I feel like that was kind of the overarching message of Nintendo's direct, or not a press conference, whatever the hell they call it, because they have to be different. But it was like, we're going to continue to support this. You won't only get 2 or 3 games every year. There will be more games, which I definitely appreciated. When it comes to Kirby and Yoshi, I'm glad we got to see the game. Like, I'm glad we got to see actual gameplay of the game. Yeah. Compared to something like, oh, hey, they're making Metroid Prime 4. Here's the title, Metroid Prime 4. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, cool. Also, the fact that the recent Metroid games have been shit. Like,
that has me real scared.
Until you can show me what the game actually is and prove that it will actually be good, I don't care at all. I'm not fanboying whatsoever over the fact that they're making Metroid Prime 4. Something I am excited about but have similar feelings about was that they said, hey, we're working on a Pokemon game for Switch.
Yeah.
And like, I should say like a Pokemon RPG in quotes for Switch.
Yes.
Which, like, cool. I'm glad they're finally fucking doing that. Why it's taken up to this point for them to make a Pokemon game for their home console boggles my mind.
It cannot
but I feel like that's kind of
possibly take them that long. They have all of these assets. The game has to already be made. Like there's
well, I guess it depends on what it is, right? It depends on what it is. Like, are they making a full-on brand new Pokemon with 150 new Pokemon, a brand new story? Are they making a Johto Pokemon game just for console? Are they making whatever the fuck, the ones that they just put out, Sun and Moon, but on console, and so they're changing it? Like, we don't really know what that Pokemon game will be. I'm glad they're doing it, but it's like that seemed more around, hey, if you're afraid that we have a couple games that came out the first year and then it's going to be fucking crickets the way that the Wii U went, this is kind of them alleviating some of those fears, which I do think is smart. It's like, I could see both sides, but me as a cynic, or I should say a realist, I'm like, don't tell me a game is going to exist when you haven't even started working on it yet. It just seems like weird. It seems like a cop-out to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But the two big games that they did show, which both look great, Mario Odyssey and Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. So I guess to start with Mario Odyssey, that's a game we already knew existed before this. They announced it last year, 2 years ago. That game looks fucking bonkers.
It looks fucking stupid.
Oh no, really?
Yep. The whole thing with the hat, named Cappy, by the way, which it's fine, whatever. But the whole, like, possess other things and become them, like, it's fucking stupid. And, like, they totally threw their wonderful, charming, amazing Mario art style out the fucking window. And, like, hey, let's have actual people stomping around this city. Like, it's
that's only part of the game.
No, but, like,
though.
all the other
Donk
areas
City
I've
stuff,
seen, they all have
Those
that
looked...
tint to them, right? Like, they're trying to make them...
that's not what I got.
That's totally what I'm getting from it. I just think it looks like shit.
But that bums me out that you don't think it looks good.
I don't think I'm going to even play it.
I'm not that excited for it, and I was hoping that you'd be able to be the positive side and sell me on it, because I'm with you. Like, some of the hat stuff they showed was cool, like the idea and the concept behind being able to take over these bodies of these different people and characters and inanimate objects. Like, the idea of that's cool. It doesn't really speak to me. Like, the weirdness, Nintendo does weird really well, but the weirdness shown in this doesn't super appeal to me. So.
No.
That sucks. I was hoping that you'd have good things to say about it, so you could sell me.
I was really hoping it would be like, Mario 3D World was. It came out on 3DS.
Yes.
That had that art style. It had that, that charm to it. And then they showed this, and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, this is stupid." I don't know. Like, there are plenty of people who are excited about it, and good for them. But I'm not gonna fucking buy that game.
And I mean, most Mario games have been good or great. So, like, there is some expectation that at least this won't be terrible. And Nintendo loves to experiment with new kinds of gameplay, and they usually succeed fairly well with that. Like, I mean, what they did in Super Mario Galaxy, like, with the differing gravity and moving them from planet to planet, that was, like, really ambitious, and it certainly worked super fucking well. So it's like I'm willing to give them the benefit of a doubt to an extent, but, like, at a core... shallow level, like what they've shown isn't super speaking to me.
Yeah, and I guess like to like a side statement for that, I guess like the Super Mario Galaxy stuff, it was such a wild change in gameplay and like just like overall structure of a game from all the previous Marios, but it still looked like it belonged in the Mario universe.
Sure.
This doesn't look like it takes place in the Mario universe.
That's fair. Well, I mean, it literally doesn't.
Oh, it actually
like
doesn't?
It takes place. Yeah, I believe they've said like the whole New Donk City is outside of the Mushroom Kingdom. I'm almost positive.
That's so stupid.
I mean, I totally could be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. But I believe that's what they've said. So I think not that it makes it good, but it makes it make sense why some of the stuff looks and feels a little different.
Yeah, but now it's like, oh, that's what lies outside of the Mushroom Kingdom? Like, finally we find out, and it's this shitty, awful, surrealist, like, bleh. No thanks, man. Just stay in the Mushroom Kingdom.
I mean, it is at least called New Donk City, which is pretty amazing.
Sure.
But obviously the other big game they talked about, which was also shown at the Ubisoft press conference, was Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. And this is like the opposite of like, oh, there's a new Mario game coming out. I'm really excited. And then when I see it, I'm like, eh. And with this, it was like, hey, there's a Mario and Rabbids crossover where Mario shoots a laser gun.
And I was like, they just gave Mario
you can go fuck yourself.
I was like, this is the first time anyone not in-house in Nintendo has control over a Mario project. And they give him a fucking gun. Are you kidding me? And then Miyamoto fucking walks out and holds a gun on stage. And I'm like, what's going on right now? And then it looks awesome.
No, that game looks so
looks
good,
great.
and I cannot believe it. Like, I'm not a huge tactical RPG person. You know, I like Final Fantasy Tactics and some other games like that, but I certainly never, like, glommed on to, like, XCOM. And that's what a lot of people are saying is that it's, like, this game is actually Mario and Rabbids XCOM.
No.
Because some of the mechanics behind it looks, I know it's not going to be as difficult as XCOM, but when it comes to like some of the mechanics and the actual gameplay and moment to moment stuff, but I don't like the humor of it looks good, and some of the stuff that had leaked before, the humor felt like seemed terrible.
I agree.
And it was like and you know, I've seen similar stuff in the entertainment industry of like these pitch docs where it's like really high level, we need to get you to understand this in a visual form or in like 2 minutes of explanation, so it's like it feels a lot worse than it does in real life. But I remember like the original poster that was leaked was from this pitch doc for these characters, and it had like one of the Rabbids dressed as Peach with the selfie stick, and it was like #sassy or whatever, and all of that was like, this seems like an abomination.
Like a nightmare.
Thankfully, like that at least doesn't seem to have made the transition to the actual game, because the humor that they showed worked for me. Like some of it was a little lame and like a little kiddie at times, but it felt appropriate for Mario, and like I chuckled a couple times on what they showed.
Me too. And I don't feel that bad about it.
Right.
But like the actual
game, yes,
totally.
Yes.
It looks like a really good time.
I cannot believe it, but I'm very happy that it looks good.
Yeah, and like that makes me happy that I have a Switch, because I genuinely am interested and excited to play that game.
Well, and especially since you're not as interested in Mario Odyssey, like knowing that there's another big game like that you wouldn't have expected, I'm sure is nice.
Yeah, that's a really
justify
good feeling.
that purchase. Yeah. So, I mean, those are all the big hits from Nintendo. Obviously, they had a much shorter conference, fewer games to talk about. A little, I wouldn't say like underwhelming overall, because like I'm glad that they're being forthright about their support for the system. But like when it comes to the games they showed and the games they quote unquote announced, I wish we would have seen a little bit more. But definitely, like as someone who doesn't own a Switch, I want one. That's for sure. And I feel like that's the goal of something like this, is to get people like me to want to buy one.
Yeah, and like, you know, I feel like, because even with the Wii U, they had by the end of its life cycle, they had a decent first party offering, but this feels like it's that, but at a little bit of a more accelerated rate. Nintendo showing that they're willing to work with third parties to expand on their core franchises is exciting too, because I don't want to play Call of Duty on Switch, right? Like, as much as people are like, oh, you know, I'll bring all these games to the Nintendo consoles so that it's like a bigger library. That's not what you come to Switch for. Generally speaking, if you have a Switch, you also have an Xbox or a PlayStation or a PC that can play other stuff. Like, the Switch isn't going to be your only console. And so seeing them experiment a little more with their franchises, and I know I just shit talked on Mario Odyssey for like 15 minutes, but seeing them experiment more is a positive thing, because those franchises can, and have been in the past, be very stagnant. And so that's just a good sign for the Switch in general.
Sure, absolutely.
And because it's just, you know, it has me excited that we at least have one example of a really good crossover / outside third party involvement with their franchises.
Well, and just the buzz around the Switch has been so much better, and the sales have been so much better than the Wii U, that, you know, Nintendo does have something to prove, that they can get this third-party support. And I'm sure to third-party publishers, Nintendo needs to prove that they're going to continue to support this console, and so they will continue to see sales. But this is definitely reassuring that there will at least be some support. And, like, you know, even though Bethesda's putting Skryim on like a fucking potato if they could, the fact that is also coming to Switch, like, it's yet again another example of third-party support for the system, which I think is very healthy. Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of, you know, talked about Microsoft, talked about Nintendo. You can check out the last episode if you haven't, where we talked about EA, Bethesda, and Ubisoft. Not tomorrow, but in the next episode, we'll talk about Sony and then some kind of miscellaneous games, so be sure to check that out. But now, before we leave you, it is time for Shea's Hate of the Week. Hate of the Week. So, this is kind of a spin-off of the Hate of the Week from last episode, where we talked about memes and some of the negative points of what memes have done for joke telling. I kind of want to talk about, and I've had strong feelings about this for quite a long time, so I'm glad to finally have an avenue to get it out there. These sites and social media handles and just people in general that steal jokes. Like, I fucking hate that. Like, these people that will steal a joke and either just like put it out there and not give proper credit, or even worse, like claim it as their own. It's just such a shitty thing to do, and it's tricky because like you can't copyright a joke. And stealing jokes have been around for years and years and years, like especially amongst stand-up comedians. And like I remember there was a story. This was a long time ago, so people listening, Kyle, you might have been too young to like understand it. But there was a big thing that came out about Carlos Mencia. This was like at the height of his popularity, and one of the reasons why you never hear about him anymore is because he was outed as having stolen a lot of his big bits from smaller comedians. And kind of, it's like the, standing on other people's shoulders to succeed versus kind of working your way up on your own and owning your own stuff. And so it's something that's been around for a long time, but I feel like has really pervaded common culture with the explosion of social media in the last several years of stealing like jokes online. And like there are two especially large what are called joke aggregates, which is like a bullshit term for joke stealers, called Fuck Jerry and Fat Jew are the two that I have heard of. And like I had only heard of them because my wife follows, I think she might just follow Fuck Jerry on Instagram. But like someone will make a meme, and whoever works at these places, they'll just research other people's, like they'll find memes and just steal them and post them. And they were finally starting to get outed as having stolen these, because before, like, they would just post it. And so, like, if I'm online and I make a joke, you assume that's my joke. Like, why would I tell someone else's joke and not tell you it's someone else's joke? And so there was this mentality of like, oh, these people are really funny. They're putting out these hilarious memes, and like Fat Jew as well. Like, oh, this dude's super funny. And I don't know the current state of it, but I know Fat Jew in particular, the guy behind the handle, he had a development deal with Comedy Central for a television show. And this happened purely on the success of his Instagram, and like he was doing sponsored posts where he was getting paid money to promote products on his posts because he had, several million followers, getting a ton of engagement. And it's like his complete business, his entire Instagram platform, like none of it was original content. It was all purely taken from other places where he wasn't giving credit. And once he started getting more and more success and like news of this Comedy Central development deal came out, people were finally like raising their hands and saying, wait, like this dude is literally doing nothing. Like, is this, like, I guess you could say the research and the aggregation of these takes some skill set, I guess. But
not the skill set
like, pick and choose the best
they're trying
stuff.
to get from it.
But yeah, not like what would this dude's television show be? Like if you look at his current
from other
platform,
television shows.
Yeah, and it's just this mentality of like, oh well, this was successful, and like he is this social media influencer, like giving this dude his own television show. Like that, like what the fuck? It just pisses me off as someone who works in the entertainment industry and knows how many talented people are out there that lack opportunities, myself among them, and seeing someone else like this who literally is bringing nothing to the table when it comes to like talent or humor or creating content, and seeing them like get an opportunity like this based on lies. Yeah. And so finally this stuff was coming to a head, and people were saying, I mean, this dude just literally steals other people's shit, where now these kinds of sites do credit. They'll say like, hey, they'll post this meme and then put on there like, oh, credit this person and link to who it was. But it's still like, that still doesn't solve the problem, because yes, at least they're not pretending that it's their own joke, but they're still getting paid from sponsors to be posting other people's shit. And like, how many times, like if you saw someone tell a joke and thought that was funny and they quoted whoever else at the bottom, how many times out of 10 are you going to go look up that other person? 1, 2 times out of 10 if it was really amazing? Yeah. Like, no, because if the mentality is, okay, I can either follow 30 people and get their funny stuff, or I can follow one person who's going to give me all 30 of those people's stuff, I'm going to follow the one person. But like, so those 30 people they're not getting the followers, they're not getting the sponsored posts, they're not getting, the growth from a social media perspective that they need to make a career in stand-up or writing or whatever it is they're trying to do. And so it's still like stealing opportunities, not just stealing jokes, but stealing opportunities from the actual talented, funny people there are out there. It's just like like that makes me so mad in and of itself. But then you have the people online that are like, well, it's just a fucking joke. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I mean, no offense to anybody listening to this, but I'm sure somebody out there listening to this is like, well, who cares? It's just a joke. And that's just as big of a problem. That pervasive sense of like, well, it doesn't matter. But if you look at it, like, it does matter, because this is the lifeblood of these people that, like, stand-up comedians now are so different from stand-up comedians a decade ago, where it was, you know, I'm going to hang around at open mics in New York City and like try to work my way up there. I'm going to, you know, wait tables at a really successful club, and maybe they'll give me an opportunity to host, or, you know, go tour a bunch of shitty colleges and try to work my way up there and build an audience. Now they have another platform via social media where they can gain a following simply by being funny online, because there are millions and millions and millions of people out there looking for funny shit. And you can make a social media following that will then expand to an actual stand-up career. Like, I know, I don't know if you've heard of him, but Rob Delaney. Have you heard of him? He's a stand-up, and so that's kind of how his career got jump-started. He was on Twitter. He was super funny, and this was like in the early days of Twitter, where it was more easier to get a lot of followers, and he just like skyrocketed to a bunch of several million Twitter followers, and was like, there were news articles being written of like, the funniest dude on Twitter, like, this is the guy you need to be following if you like comedy on Twitter. And like, his stand-up career is so much more successful now because of Twitter than it was before. And so someone like him can succeed via social media, which is like a crazy concept in and of itself. But then you have people like Fuck Jerry Fat Jew who are taking away those opportunities. Like someone like Rob Delaney, if he was just starting up now, his best bits would be stolen by sites like Fuck Jerry and Fat Jew, and no one would be looking at him for this comedy. They'd be looking at Fuck Jerry and Fat Jew, either associating that comedy with them because people aren't smart enough to look at the CC or created by or written by or whatever else, or even if they are acknowledging, oh, well, this isn't by them, it's by this dude Rob Delaney, but why do I care? Why do I need to follow Rob Delaney when all of his funniest tweets are going to be on these other places? It's just like this is a huge issue to me as someone who really cares about entertainment, and especially comedy, that like people aren't talking about this in the way that they should. And it just, like, I don't know, man, it grinds my gears. Now that I know you hate it, I'm never gonna stop saying it.
So like I get what you're saying, and I agree with most of it. I guess I would just say that when you're saying like they're purely stealing the jokes and completely taking credit for them and stuff, it's not a one-to-one win, fuck Jerry, loss, original content creator, because, you know, as long as they are giving credit, I do agree, like, I don't know how to solve the problem of the fact that these aggregate sites are making money off other people's content. I don't know how to really solve that problem, but there is, you know, there's such a wide variety of people that follows aggregate sites that even if it is the 1 in 10, even if it is the 1 in 100 people that click that source, right, to go find out who it originated from, the internet is so vast now, and there's so many people doing these types of things, that odds are even if someone wasn't having their shit stolen and put in people's faces, they would never get that even 1 in 100 person to see their stuff. So that's at least something that can be given back to the original creator. I'm not saying that is proportionally fair or right. I'm just saying, I guess, like, I have no idea, and, you know, I'm 25 and not the best business mind in the world, but I have no idea how you even begin to solve that kind of a problem. And I also don't know that it's Fuck Jerry or Fat Jew's fault. Like, they have created this system, like, they aggregated all of these funny things and put them out there, and their brilliant maneuver was making it easier for people to find funny content, right? Like, that's what they contributed. So that's what they make money. In my mind, that's why they make money, because they created a place in which people have an easier time getting access to those things. Now, maybe the solution is, a certain, you know, like, we have 1,000 views on this one post and it's by this other person. We're getting paid ad money off of those 1,000 views. So a portion of that ad revenue should go to whom we cited as the source, right? Maybe that's part of a solution. That's such a mess.
And well, yeah, and I mean that's one of my responses to what you're saying, because I feel like the core of your side of it is it opens up a larger potential audience than they would have been able to attain on their own.
So yeah.
Which I think that is 100% valid. Totally agree with that in theory. I think the issue comes down to 2 points. One is what you mentioned about the financial side, that these other people that are actually making the content are not making money off of this.
And so like I guess
it's people that are taking their things. And the larger piece of it, which I think is the like where that would originate, is permission. Like these aggregate sites are not getting permission from the content creators to be posting this. There's no communication back and forth. They're not reaching out and be like, "Oh, yo, this was super funny. Hey, I have 6 million Twitter followers. Do you mind?" Like, because one, like me as the aggregate, it helps me because it's helping me create content, get more page views, grow my audience too by posting funny shit. But hey, I can also help you out, person with 1,000 Twitter followers, by giving you a much larger expanded audience. And like maybe the conversation can end there. If that person's like, "Oh well, yeah, absolutely. Like as long as you credit me, like I'm fine with you using my stuff and making a little bit of money for the page clicks, or like if it's a sponsored post or whatever, because I'm going to see the return in expanding my audience." Like that's super cool. And then the second piece is that person, like they should get a cut of that revenue.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the aggregate sites they're still hosting the content. They're still doing the work. They do have the larger audience. So like it makes sense why they're making some money. But at the core of it, like when it comes to Instagram, which is where like most of this is, at least in my experience, like, an Instagram handle like Fuck Jerry, like it doesn't cost money to have an Instagram. It's not like there is a ton of like there's no like web development work to be putting a post together. There's no time that they're spending making and like writing a comment about the joke. It's purely like it's basically like I'll take a screenshot of this meme and post it on my site.
I mean,
and
there's
then I'll CC whoever wrote it.
Overhead the right
like,
term? There's no overhead.
Yeah. Right. Like there's no added value on their end other than the larger audience, which like I 100% agree there is value in that from an exposure point of view. There definitely is value in that, but at the core of it, like that still bothers me because like if it were me, I wouldn't want to be associated with one of those two places. Even if I thought that I would get more followers because of it, because of all the shit that's circling around those two in particular right now, and a lot of like the negative media and the negative press that they're getting because of this, I would not want to be associated with them. And that's totally just me personally. I wouldn't look down on someone else for pursuing that opportunity. But there could very well be other aggregate sites that I would like I follow the Chive, and they do similar stuff, but they always get permission. They always CC the person. They always link all their handles, blah, blah, blah. And so like with a site like that, I might be interested in working with them and having some of my quotes or whatever if I was a stand-up on their site.
Because it sounds like they have more respect for the content creator. And are more cognizant of their limited role in what they're doing.
Yeah,
so that's
And I don't know if they give a cut, because like they in the posts I'm thinking of specifically, like they do stand-up comedian posts where they'll show a picture of the person, a funny bit from one of their stand-ups, and then like link their Twitter or their Instagram or whatever else. And it's a thing that I check in on regularly, and like I will occasionally go, and I'm like the 1 out of 10. I will occasionally go look at their Twitter, see what else they got, or like, hey, I'll search on Netflix, like, oh, has this person done a special before? Like, can I find some of their stuff on YouTube if I think it's really funny? I will absolutely do that sometimes, not all the time. I don't know if those people are getting a cut. I would assume they're not, but from an exposure perspective and knowing that they get permission ahead of time, that doesn't bother me as much. It's these places that like started out literally stealing this stuff and are now still stealing it. They're just telling you where they stole it from. Like, is that like does that really make it better? So I guess at the core of it, it's like it like fuck Jerry, fuck Fat Jew. Like that's really the crux of the hate of the week. And I'm not saying fuck fat Jews. Like I don't have a problem of people of the Jewish faith. I don't have a problem with people that are overweight. But fuck fat Jews specifically. Like fuck the one dude. Fuck that guy. And also fuck Jerry. I don't have a problem with people named Jerry. Like if you're Jerry, not fuck you, but fuck Jerry.
I'm glad you were able
I found a good way to make that as confusing as,
I'm glad,
possible.
you were able to, break that down and help everyone understand.
the core of my hatred. It's not this like larger thing. I don't have a problem with this larger thing, these people, but these specific people.
Right.
So yeah, that's my long-winded feelings on people that steal jokes. Fuck people that steal jokes.
Yeah, I think that's messed up.
Yes. So, thanks for everybody for listening to now episode 3 of the Shea Hates Everything podcast. If you have any thoughts like on what we just talked about or any games, any opinions on really anything we talked about, send an email to info@sheahateseverything.com. If you enjoyed this, want more content like this, want to read reviews on some of the games we talked about, movies and whatnot, you can check out my website, sheahateseverything.com, for more of my cynicism and sarcasm. Got to stick to my branding. And thanks, Kyle, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, like I said, next episode we'll talk through Sony's press conference and some other E3 games, and also just catching up on some other stuff we're watching, reading, and playing. And I guess we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.